near and dear to my heart. And the reason being is really it all started at IFMA. And a quick word about IFMA is I'm forever indebted to IFMA for all of the training and all of the mentoring I received over the years. I've learned more that has helped me in my career and personally from IFMA than any other organization I've been involved with. And I can't say enough about the benefit of these types of webinars, education that IFMA provides, and taking advantage of those things to improve your professional and personal lives. The gravity of what we're going to talk about here is pretty serious, and I consider it life-changing. And you know, who would have thought you would have logged onto a webinar here in the afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, and I'm here telling you it's something that's going to be life-changing. And I've seen it happen enough times to be able to make that proclamation boldly. And therefore, you know, I know a lot of folks are out there doing a lot of things. You're in the FM world, and therefore you are probably multitasking or considering multitasking right now. And I would just implore you and urge you to really focus on what we're going to be talking about today, because it can have some profound effect on your demeanor, your attitude, your peacefulness, your clarity, and most importantly, your productivity. I was turned on to this concept, which is what I'm going to refer to as GTD, Getting Things Done. It's based on a book by David Allen by a friend I met at IFMA, and it was at a time where I probably would have had a nervous breakdown were it not for learning this material. Now, you might be a Jedi at dealing with chaos already, and if that's the case, watch this with an eye on how you could use some of these principles to help other people. Take what you've learned and pass it on to your staff or other people in your family to help them and free them from this chaos. So before we get started, I want to say I've done informal surveys and studies on this material at organizations I've worked with and for, and inevitably, if I ask why 5 times, why is there underperformance, why are there problems, and I keep getting to the root cause, inevitably it comes down to the fact that the principles and concepts we're going to be talking about today are not being adhered to. It's a very base root cause issue. So it's a very important topic, and I urge you to focus. And on my part, I promise I won't do death by PowerPoint. I'm not somebody that reads off their slides and puts everybody to sleep here before lunch. So let's get right to it. So everybody has to deal with stuff. Stuff comes into your life, and it comes into your life from various areas. It can come in electronically, you know, from your devices, your laptop, your PDAs, et cetera. Verbally, you get somebody telling you something. Hey, can you do this on the 7th floor? Can you do this hot and cold call, whatever it is? Can you pick up milk tomorrow? That kind of stuff. Physical, you get things coming at you that are physical, paper, boxes, anything physical or tangible comes to you. I mean, we all have paper still in this world. And then thoughts. Those are things that you come up with in your own mind, ideas, thoughts, concepts, and all of those things feed into the stuff that you have to deal with on a daily basis. So the question is what do we do with that stuff? Well, in most cases, we put that stuff into our brains. And the problem with that is the brain is only designed to hold so much stuff, okay? You picture it like you've got a circle around your brain, and that brain can take care of a certain degree of stuff on its own. You can remember this, that, and the other thing, and eventually, you know, you can only hold so much in your little universe there, but stuff starts to slip through the cracks. And you, well, oh, that's right, I got to pick up milk. And it just pops into your mind again. And the thing is you get further and further out, and more stuff slips through the cracks until, you know, that meeting with that vendor that you verbally agreed to, you forgot to put on your books, she shows up and you simply don't have it on your books because it was stuff that slipped through the cracks. Now, this is a radical departure from what you hear in the media and everywhere else, where you need more ginkgo biloba and vitamins to make your brain remember things more. And that is a lie, okay? The brain is not designed to memorize and keep track of a lot of stuff. You can only keep so many balls in the air, okay, the way your brain is designed. And new stuff is constantly coming in. I mean, you're FMs. You're the decathletes of the business world. You are getting wave upon wave upon wave, in many cases, of unpredictable stuff coming at you. And that list never gets to zero. So you have a tremendous opportunity for things to slip through cracks. So the way the brain works is when you have an open loop, when that pick up milk or meet with vendor or trim that tree in front of the lobby, if you don't do something with that, your brain can't stop itself. It can't help itself. It's going to continuously try to solve that problem of picking up milk along with everything else. The brain is meant to create and focus on single tasks. It's not meant to remember all of your open loops. And that's why things slip through the cracks. Subconsciously and consciously, your brain is devoting a tremendous amount of energy to closing those loops. So the money quote here by David Allen, who developed this system, is, and this is something you want to memorize as holy scripture here. Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. Again, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. So every day you're dealing with things like get milk, email John, meet with vendor X, trim that tree in front of the lobby, Susan's birthday present, TPS reports, build out on the 7th floor, change oil in your car, staff performance reviews. All of this stuff is coming at you. The brain is probably one of the worst tools for juggling all of those open loops, because it's going to constantly try to close them and solve the problems unless you can make it feel safe and build a level of trust with your own brain. If you don't, those open loops are basically going to lead to chaos and what has been referred to as a constipated psyche. And I'm sure everyone at some point has experienced the constipated psyche if you've been in this industry long enough. So the key is to ask yourself, why is this on my mind, and what do I need to do to get it off my mind? Why is it that, oh, that's right, I have to pick up milk, keeps coming up in your brain? Because you have not properly dealt with that open loop. And I use milk, but you can obviously insert any other concept there. So the skill to learn here, the important skill, this is a good takeaway, is to actively listen to what's popping into your mind and get it off your mind into a trustworthy system. If you do that, it's almost magical the way the brain works. If the brain trusts you to take that open loop and park it somewhere that it feels safe it's going to be addressed in the perfect, proper time, it lets go of that open loop and frees up mental, psychic energy for you. Your brain is now free to create and focus on tasks instead of worrying about getting milk on a subconscious level. So instead of using your brain, what should you use to collect all of this stuff? Well, the first thing to do is get all of your stuff in. Don't use your brain because it's the wrong tool for the job. Collect your stuff into buckets. Now, there's only so many types of buckets that you need to collect stuff. And pretty much this is I guess what you would call the irreducible specificity of buckets. You have an in-basket to collect things that are paper, notes, periodicals, things like that, a physical in-basket. Legal pads or anything to write with and collect notes that are handwritten, and we'll talk a little bit about that versus electronic in a minute. You have apps, which includes all of your electronic ability to collect stuff and deal with stuff in buckets. And then your phone, which is obviously for some more electronic collection, but also for voicemail. So let's talk a little bit about these buckets. And quickly before I do that, some of this stuff may appear rudimentary, but in case after case after case where I sat with people and worked with them on implementing the system, inevitably, most people know some of these things, but very few actually implement them in a disciplined, cohesive system. So stay with me here because we're going to blow this up into a system that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about your in-basket. That's for things like your mail that comes in, forms, papers, receipts, etc. Every piece of physical material that passes into my world, in my office, goes through my in-basket. That's paper. And that doesn't mean my chair. That's one of my pet peeves, is when people come in and they leave something on my chair or on my keyboard. That's not my inbox. And it used to be like, you watch these movies from the 50s, everybody had an inbox on their desk. Everybody had the little stack trays and so forth. What happened to those things? Now, I understand that we're mobile now and so forth, but we can still designate an area where it's our inbox area. And the same thing is true when I go to other people's desks. I like to leave something in a place that I know they're going to get it. And a quick little tip here, have a space in your office or area that can handle things bigger than a sheet of paper. If you've got a box that comes in or some other physical stuff that you have to deal with, designate an area. I have one shelf on my bookcase that I keep open to deal with those items. So you might, as an FM, might get some new measurement tool that comes in, or you might get some kind of a big training manual that doesn't fit in your inbox that comes in that you need to deal with. That's a good spot for that. Next is your legal pad. This is anything written, and an iPad may not be the best tool for this kind of collection, and the reason being is, I keep legal pads everywhere, in my car, by my bed, at my desk. I carry one with me, and that's so that anywhere I can quickly write something down without having to boot up an iPad, or your iPad can only be in so many places. Are you going to bring it to the bed and set it next to the bed in case you get some idea as you're falling asleep that you can't forget? So that's why paper is still very valuable to collect data. And that paper now, where do you think that goes after you capture a note? Into your inbox. Okay, so you've written a note to yourself and you've put it in your inbox, or you've taken notes from a meeting that might have action items, that goes into your inbox. And a quick little second pet peeve is, if you attend meetings and you see people attending meetings and they don't have a collection device like a legal pad or an iPad or something to take notes on the meeting, you need to get them to go get a pad and come back to the meeting. There's nothing surer, nothing more certain than that person is going to drop balls on the action items that have been created at that meeting if they haven't captured them. But I see that almost in every meeting that I attend, where there's people that are shaking their heads yes, and they have not collected anything other than using their brain. Next are your apps. Okay, so what are apps? Well, that's your software, like your Microsoft Outlook, your Google tools, etc. That's a way for you to collect data, and there's fantastic technology out there to do this. Some of it is way over-engineered, in my opinion. I think this is a very keep it simple kind of area for us, where the more simple and easier to use the system is, the more likely you will use it. But one key thing, don't use multiple tools unless you can sync them together. If you're running a calendar in Google and then one on your Microsoft Outlook, and they each have claws into your time, that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for things to fall through the cracks. Unless you're going to constantly go back and forth and keep these two calendars open in front of you, you're going to overbook yourself. Or somebody's going to book time that you've booked yourself out on your Google Calendar for, but not on your Outlook calendar for. So we'll talk a little bit about calendars, but if you can't sync these apps together in some way, find a way to do that with another app. And then we have the phone, and that includes things like your voicemail or apps that are synced to your other devices or desktop unit or laptop. And listen, either sync your phone to your computer or push everything to your computer. So if you make a calendar appointment on your phone, and that calendar appointment does not pop up onto your laptop, you need to find a way to make that to happen. And there's a lot of third-party tools that can do that if you don't have a way to do that. And I understand some people may have difficulty with their particular IT structure at work, and we can talk a little bit about that at the end if some people have questions about ways to work around. But this is another in-bucket for you to collect things via your phone. So if you get all your stuff in, pick up milk. Paper comes in from IFMA HQ that you need to deal with. You have an idea that you want to get Susie, a DVD collection for her birthday. You've got emails coming in. Well, now all that stuff is now properly collected in these few buckets. And the next question you have to ask yourself is, what is it? What is this particular piece of stuff sitting in this bucket? And this is where the Getting Things Done system is so elegant and makes sense, especially at fighting the chaos of everyday life. So the question is what is it? Okay, let's just use an example. Get milk. What is it? Okay, is it actionable? Well, yes, it's actionable. Okay, that's a particular item it is. But what if it's not actionable? There's really only three things you need to do with that stuff that's not actionable. It either goes in the trash, it's either a credit card offer, it's somebody asking you to donate to a cause that you don't believe in, or whatever the case may be. You've got trash there. The next thing is it could be a someday maybe. So you've got this stuff coming in that says, okay, how about a trip to Hawaii for a discounted rate? You say to yourself, I might want to take advantage of that. You put that in the someday maybe. Or you might say, hey, next time I'm in New York, or I'd like to go to New York one day and explore. You can create a someday maybe task that says New York and keep notes about that. But it's not actionable now. But the thing is that you've gotten that New York trip off your brain and parked it somewhere. And you know that it's there, but you don't have to think about it on a daily basis, subconsciously or consciously. And the last is reference. You might get an FM journal or something that comes through that you want to keep as a piece of reference, but it's not actionable. You're just going to save it. So this is really the only three options you're going to deal with something that's not actionable. But what if it is? The question to ask is, what is the next action? What is the next action that's involved in this issue? It could be picking up milk. Well, the stepping back, especially in our field in FM, a lot of our next actions are part of a larger project connected to many actions. And those are multi-steps, and those are projects. Now, the thing about projects is all of you should have at least, and this is at least 50 to 100 work and personal related projects at any given time, and possibly many more. I've had many more in my career at times. And those projects consist of everything from, hang pictures in the living room all the way to build out on the 7th floor. Okay? All of those are projects that have multiple steps that you need to address in order to make that project come to fruition. Now, quickly here, how many people are, blocking out time on their calendar in advance for projects where you break it down in project planning and say, I'm going to need to spend 6 hours on Wednesday working on this milestone and so forth, and pre-blocking the time out on your calendar to do that, or are we just reacting to those things as they happen? Now, I know many of you are probably very disciplined and do some form of project management, but unless each project has a definite next action associated with it that you can put your finger on and put the pulse on and get the pulse of that project, you're going to have some feeling of consternation and where is this, what's the status of this thing, where is it, and you're going to be worrying about that, and that's going to add to the chaos of daily life. We'll talk a little bit more about fleshing some of this out. And then the next question to ask is, will it take less than 2 minutes? And this is one of the things I like about the GTD system, is if it takes less than 2 minutes, just do it. And I even have a 2-minute timer on my desktop. It's a little app that comes with an add-in I have where I just press the clock. And if I can do it under 2 minutes, if I think I can, I get it done right then and there, and really boosts your feeling of productivity for the day when you can, take care of a lot of these 2-minute tasks. So if you can't do it in 2 minutes, what do you do with it? Well, you only have two choices at this point in time. Okay? You can either delegate it or you can defer it. Okay, so this is something that's actionable that's going to take you more than 2 minutes. So let's talk about deferring something. And that would mean to do at a later specific time. Okay, specific is the key word here. And that's something that would go on your calendar. So let's talk about your calendar. I'm a calendar junkie. I can't live without my calendar, and because I don't put things in my brain. So if I don't have the calendar, I don't know what I'm supposed to do each day. And as I mentioned earlier, it's critical to use only one calendar and not multiple calendars. And the question I get back from people, well, what about my personal time? And I tell everybody, it's all your time. You're just giving 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day to company X, but it's still your time. So having these two calendars that you have to bounce back and forth from and check before you can make commitments and negotiate your time is chaotic. It's the definition of chaotic. So the way I look at the calendar, and I hope this sticks with you, is the calendar is the way you communicate with future you. Now, to give you an example of what I'm talking about here, I'm sure all of us at some point or another has said, the night before you go to bed, I heard it's going to rain. I don't want to forget my umbrella. And you lean the umbrella against the door or hang it on the handle, right? Or you say, I can't forget to bring that folder to work tomorrow, from the home office. You lean it against the door. The reason why you do that is because you don't trust yourself. And there's nothing more true than that. You shouldn't trust yourself to remember, because your brain is a lousy tool at remembering the umbrella and the contract along with picking up the milk and the 7th floor build-out. It's too much. So you leave a reminder for future you, tomorrow's you, to bring the umbrella. That's what your calendar is. Your calendar is the way you communicate with future you. And you never, ever, ever want to try to remember anything, ever, at all. Don't try to remember anything. Really, never. Don't try to remember it. Put it on your calendar. If it needs to be done on a specific day, at a specific time, don't leave it in your brain to remember. So let's talk about the calendar, because often I find software designers design things with a certain intent, and we get them in our hands and we use them in a certain way that's maybe not the best way or the intended way. And these are some tips for a Microsoft calendar, though this can be applied to virtually any calendar system you may be using. But there's a day-specific section and a time-specific section. I'm going to show you how you can use some of these to fight the chaos in your life here. The last thing, of course, is don't put it on your calendar unless you plan to do it. The calendar is the place where the intersection of your time and effort with the real world. And it's what you plan to do that day. So let's look at the day-specific section. This is a great area for you to park a lot of different things that you need to know that day. You need to know that your boss, Jane Smith, is on vacation, okay? Any kind of other multi-day info. Or you just might want to leave a message from present you for future you to remember to do something, right? That day. It can be done anytime during that day. I also put my flight and hotel info when I travel in the all-day section, so that I can just double-click there and I have all my booking information and so forth, and it pops right up. And, of course, it syncs to my phone as well. If I make lunch reservations, if I have maps to today's appointments that I need to use. So oftentimes at IFMA events, they give you a special map as to how to get into a certain area from a campus. I park those there. And then any general tasks with no specific time that day to be done, but they need to be done that day. So let's also talk about the specific time section. You see, these are basic things. I mean, we're all familiar with calendars. Meeting with John and Jane. I get to the point where when people look at my calendar, sometimes they, whoa, because when I travel, I put my travel time to the airport, I put my time waiting at the airport, I put my time boarding, I put the time of the flight and the time of arrival. You say, well, why do you go through all that effort to put all of that in your calendar? It's so I don't have to think when I'm traveling. I show up. I know when I'm supposed to leave the house or the office to get to the airport. I don't have to think. I know when the boarding is. I know when I'm going to get off that plane. It's all right there. I don't have to constantly search for it on my handheld to find, well, when do I arrive again? It's all right there. And then, the way I want to communicate this to you is that your calendar should just allow you to show up each day and follow the instructions you left for yourself. That's what it is. You show up and say, oh, what instructions did I leave for myself to follow? Now, I know what some of you are thinking, that you have fires that you have to deal with every day. And I understand that as well as anybody, because I was in a position for many years where I spent an average of 2 to 3 hours a day dealing with unpredictable fires. So how could I deal with something like that? Well, the way it is, I didn't overbook my schedule. I knew that 2 or 3 hours of my day were going to come at me with teeth and flames, and I better have some cushion in my schedule on a daily basis to deal with that. So I would book a recurring cushion time in my calendar every day to deal with that. And I understood that by monitoring my own time for a period of time to quantify how much time I needed to do that. But if you're that type of, and you're in facilities, you're going to deal with a certain degree of that every day. Make sure you don't overbook yourself. So let's talk some more about these recurring items. I love recurring items. I'm one of the few people that I know that remembers things like Administrator's Day and birthdays and so forth because I put them on my calendar. And little things like that, I mean, I guess with the advent of Facebook and some other things, it's easier to remember birthdays for your friends because it tells you. But think about all the things you do on a routine basis. If you have to complete your weekly TPS reports, book the time out now. Now, you can always move these things around and renegotiate your time, but you blocked yourself out a certain part of your time to do the TPS reports. So rather than you worrying, I've got to do the TPS reports, I've got to get those done, I've got to get those done, and that open loop that just keeps repeating, you now know you parked this for Thursday and it's going to get done, and every Thursday in the future. Process your email inbox. That's a whole other topic we're going to talk about. That's probably the looming elephant in the room we're going to be talking about in a little bit. And quarterly business reviews. Anything that you do on a routine basis, and these aren't just things that people push to you from their invites, the recurring meetings. These are things for your time that you do on a routine basis. If you meet with your janitorial vendor for a walkthrough once a month, if you do quarterly business reviews with your vendors, if you have staff meetings, regular staff training, do it now and get it on your calendar. You can always move it and renegotiate that, but get it out of your brain and get it into a system and free yourself up from that chaos. Individual calendar items, I don't know if folks use this or not, but it's a great way to park information about that particular item. And some of this might seem rudimentary to some of you, but again, I say, I've looked at people's calendars many, many times and find that many, I would say most, people are not using some of these things to their fullest to fight this kind of chaotic, constipated lifestyle. So individual calendar items is a great place for you to store items about that meeting. If you've got staff performance reviews coming up and you're collecting information and data and so forth, store it right in the exact item that you're going to be dealing with when the time comes for you to do that review, rather than having to go and pull it from 10, 15, 20 different files, search your email inbox for 3 hours, trying to find all that stuff, and then do the performance reviews. That's enough to make anybody crazy. But if you can kind of, as something comes in about, oh, I've got to mention this to Sally on her performance review, boom, goes right into your calendar item about performance reviews. It's a great way to park that information. I talked about negotiating your time. If you're not blocking out time on your calendar to accomplish your personal tasks and project actions, then you're just drifting. You're reacting. And if I look at calendars on my staff when I train them on this, and I look, and if I find that most of the items or all of the items on their calendar are invites from other people, they're drifting. They're reacting. They're not proactively accomplishing the tasks that they need to do. And systemically, it's because they're not collecting all of those things out of their brain into a system. So their calendars are empty. And that in itself is enough to drive someone crazy, because you show up and you don't really know what it is you're supposed to accomplish that day. I mean, think about, there's really nothing more demeaning to do to someone else or to yourself in a professional environment than for them not to know what they need to do to contribute to the success of your department or organization. And if someone is just showing up and not working from a planned list of tasks and actions they need to do to move the ball down the field for your department or organization, in most cases, it's because no one's ever taught them how to do that. I don't believe those people are inherently coasting or goofing off. I believe most of them just have never, ever been taught to do this, especially a lot of the younger generation who's used to multitasking and constantly being on their computer or device. It's a very reactive kind of lifestyle. And there's some studies out there about the detriments and benefits of that, but an empty calendar is a sure sign that someone's drifting. And by the way, this is a breeding ground for that saying we've all heard, poor planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. Hello, is that not, part of our daily life and facilities, whether it's someone on our staff or whether it's usually someone above us, possibly in the C-suite that, gets a bee in their bonnet and they want us to do something, or they forget until the last minute that they're having this major board meeting and you better make sure everything's ready. So this kind of poor planning, by not utilizing the calendar effectively, not only will affect you personally, but it affects the morale of your team and the overall productivity. And part of the things that affect this too are people are just reacting. They become email junkies. I mean, this isn't a poll question, but how many of you, just ask yourself, have your email notification window on so that every time an email comes up, you get that little window from Microsoft or whatever software platform you're using? I hate that thing. That's a shiny bauble. We love to chase new emails when they come in. First of all, because we feel we have to get right on it right away because it's there. But more often than not, here's what I think it is. I think because people, for the most part, don't have a plan each day on their calendar, that they see that email and it's a diversion. If I'm 100% honest with myself, in the past when I used to do that, it's because it's a diversion. Oh, I'll follow that and I'll do something about that email. And then I do it and I come back to what I was doing, spend 15 minutes trying to get my head back in the game, and then another email comes in, another shiny bauble. Oh, let's chase it and let's see what it is. Instead of being disciplined and saying, no, I've said I've got an hour set aside here to work on staff performance reviews. That is what's most important for me right now. I will look at that email in a minute. If it's important enough, if there's a leak on the third floor, somebody's going to call me about it. I don't have to chase that email. So I highly recommend you turn that function off so you can wean yourself from the email junkie syndrome. So let's talk about negotiating your time. When somebody says, hey, Mary, hey, Fred, can you do such and such? Well, there's only a few possible answers. It could be yes, sure, I can do that for you. It can be no, I can't do that for you, or the maybe if. And this is what most commonly happens, is the maybe if. Yeah, maybe I can do that if I can move some things around. or maybe I can do that instead. Can I do it on Wednesday instead of Tuesday for you? And that's renegotiating. But you can't renegotiate unless you already know what your commitments are. You've negotiated with yourself and other people for items on your calendar. If a new thing drops in the middle of your world, a wave of chaos comes through, says, hey, Fred, can you do this for me? And you look and you look at your calendar and you say, does it have to be done today? Yeah, I've got to get it done today. Okay, I can do it, but let me see if I can move some things around. You get on the phone with your other commitments, renegotiate those, and then you can do it. But if you didn't have that, here's what happens, okay? You don't renegotiate your commitments, and you end up staying at the office until midnight to get everything done because you didn't renegotiate. Because you didn't have a full list or a detailed list of what you were supposed to accomplish that day and couldn't push them forward to some other days. And that is a self-inflicted wound of one of the worst kind, where you're saying yes to things and getting them done, but you're not readjusting your commitments. And that will lead to burnout, and that will lead to very unhappy facility managers. And your team might not be too happy with you either at that point in time. So we talked about doing things at a specific time on the calendar. Well, what about things that don't have to be done necessarily at a specific time that need to be done? These we call the next actions. These are things to do as soon as I can. Now, everybody has heard of the to-do list. Oh, put it on your list. And people tend to keep one large list of things to do. And talk about creating psychic constipation. You just have this major list, and on it you've got everything from, hang the picture frames in the living room to buy dog food to meet with the vendor about their poor performance, all on the same list. So part of the getting things done method is to have discrete and separate lists. So keeping a list of all of your projects. Remember I said you should have at least 50 to 100 current projects going on, personal and professional. But segregating your lists by category is extremely helpful. There are only certain things you can do while you're at the office. Why not put them on a list of just office stuff, stuff at home, What about calls? You get a free half hour free up in your schedule where you sit down and the vendor's late or somebody canceled. You go to your calls list and say, oh, there's 3 calls I can make right now. Boom, boom, boom. Instead of having to rifle through and search to find, oh, yeah, I was supposed to call Mary. Oh, yeah, where's her number? It's right there on your list. Now, just to give you an example of the power of this, the errands list, I keep separate errands for shops and stores I go to on a routine basis. I have an at Home Depot, and I have an at Staples list. I have an at FedEx Kinko's list. And as those things pop into my head, I record them on this list so that when I'm out and about and I pass a Home Depot, I say, oh, that's right, I need to pick up a new set of magnets or a set of hooks to hang those pictures. I stop in and I get things done because I have it on that list. And it does, listen, what do you think takes more time? Me listening to my brain that says, hey, pick up hooks to hang those pictures in the living room, and taking the time to just quickly type it on a list? Or what do you think takes more time, that or me going to Home Depot to pick up fertilizer, getting home and then saying, dang it, I should have picked up those hooks, right? And just apply that across every area of your life. Now, there's another list that I don't have on here. That my list is far more extensive than these categories. I love the agendas list. So I keep an agenda, one for my CEO, one for some of my sales staff, even for agendas to talk with my wife, things I need to mention that I don't want to forget. So I'll say, you know, my CEO's name is Corey, so I'll say at Corey on there. So then I know the next time I can get in front of Corey to talk with him, I pull up my at Corey agendas list, and I've got 5 or 6 things that are there that I need to talk with him about. And they don't slip my mind, and I don't have to keep pestering him with things over and over again. So I love that list. Now, these other ones here at the bottom, waiting for and someday, we're going to talk extensively about waiting for here in a second, but the someday list is anywhere you want to park those someday maybe things, vacations, ideas you have. Hey, I want to write a book someday. Get them off your brain and get them into a someday maybe list. And you know, we're going to talk about also how to refer to those lists in the future, but I talked about next actions. And I notice some people have trouble understanding what the next action concept is. So let's just go through a few just to really understand. Do inventory report is not a next action. What is the next action to do the inventory report? Is it get the form from Sarah to fill out? Is it schedule time to do inventory physical count? Is it create new inventory reporting form before doing the inventory count? See, what I'm saying is you have to ask yourself the question, is join a gym an action item? No. It could be, well, I want to research gyms. So how can I research gyms? Well, I could research gyms online. Okay. Do I want to schedule an hour to do that tomorrow night? Yes. Or it could be ask Bill about his gym and if he likes it. And that could be your next action item. Move into a new apartment. That's not an action item. That's another project. What's the first step? Research apartments in the area or do budget to determine how much you can afford. What is the next action? Same thing for an RFP. Same thing for your staff performance reviews. Don't put, these are project titles. These are not action items. If you can specifically, with utter specificity, determine what the specific next action is to move a project forward, you are going to feel very good about yourself because you're going to know exactly where that project stands and what you or your staff needs to do to move the ball down the field on that project, whether it's hanging pictures in your living room or doing the build out on the 7th floor or getting your CFM designation. Okay, that's a big, amorphous project there. What does that mean? Does that mean you need to, set aside money to do it? Does that mean that you want to talk to Mary about how she did on the test and get some information? What does that mean? And define those next actions and then use the system. Put it through the system. What is it? So I told you I would mention waiting for lists, and if there's one extremely powerful thing that I think you're going to thank me for at the end of this, if you implement it, is the waiting for list. And when you delegate something to someone, there are certain rules you have to follow, and I found that very few people follow them correctly, and they either shoot themselves in the foot or incorrectly get angry at someone else for not doing something. So when you delegate something to someone, a piece of stuff comes into your world that you need to delegate, Be specific about the results. And that's not micromanagement. Micromanagement is being specific about how you want them to do every little step along the way. Being specific about the results is what are you trying to achieve? That's the number one thing in project planning, right? You start with the end goal. When is it due? So far we have, Susan, I need you to develop a new inventory report for me that takes into account par levels. Here's the old report. Please come up with something for me to look at, and I need it by the 13th. Okay. And I'm going to check in with you on the 12th or the 11th, or will you check in with me on the 10th on how it's going? That's key, okay? Especially if you have someone on your staff that hasn't built a level of trust with you, that when you give them the next action, they deliver. So make sure that's a key component, okay? This is very simple. It's a very habitual thing, but here's the cool part. Track it on your waiting for list. Now, I have a whole list called @waiting for. Whenever I ask anyone except the most trustworthy people, anyone for anything, I keep it on my waiting for list. I say waiting for Mary to send me the figures from last quarter. I have waiting for new such and such to be released. Blah 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 blah. I've got it. If I order something from Amazon, waiting for Amazon to deliver my DVD box set. Right? All of that is on my waiting for list. That alone is going to help you tremendously. It's like putting a fish hook and a fish line on everything you ask for from someone else, and at any point you can jerk that fishing rod back and see where it stands. And what I do is I go one step further. If it's a mission critical thing that I need by a certain date, guess where it goes? On my calendar. Follow up with Susie about inventory report. And here's what happens. I call Susie on the 11th. It's due on the 13th. Say, hey, Susie, I'm just calling to check in on that inventory report. Do you need any help? How's everything going? And I listen. And if there's that gap, or there's that, oh, yeah, right? That means Susie did not park the necessary time on her calendar to get that done. She left it in her email inbox, and here we are. So fortunately, I've called her a couple of days before to give her a chance to scramble to get the thing done. But if you do that enough times with your staff, they're going to realize you're going to follow up with them about specific next actions routinely, and they better get with the program or they're going to eject themselves from the organization. It's critical that you follow up with individuals and train them to understand they have a responsibility to follow up with that. That's where all these balls get dropped, where you ask somebody to do something, you forget about it because you don't put it on your waiting for list. You stumble across an email in your inbox 2 weeks later and say, oh, that's right, I asked her to do that inventory report. And then you call her, oh, yeah. Think about the lost productivity and just the worry and the bad feelings that happen. Because now Susan's going to think, oh, man, now I got to do this report. I'm so busy. I got all this other stuff to do, when it didn't have to be that way. So hard copies for your filing cabinet, these are things that anything that comes into your world that's a hard copy. If you have reference materials or project plans, you save those in a file cabinet, okay, for future use. But make sure you can get at them easily. Use only, why are we using 5 tab folders for this kind of stuff? This is about getting to material fast and easy when you need it. I label each thing with a label maker. Everything is big font right across a single tab folder. You know what that means? The tab goes across the entire top of the folder. And I can find things in bold, big letters easily, quickly, and fast. So any of that stuff that comes in you need to save, do it that way. So here's the system. This is the getting things done system. So the way you sew all of this up with yourself is you review that system enough times that you're comfortable. What does that mean? Well, I think at least a daily review. What do you need to do tomorrow? So before you shut down for the day, what's on your calendar? What is it that you need to accomplish tomorrow? Do you know what you're doing tomorrow? So before you shut down, look at tomorrow, see what you're going to do, see if there's anything you need to do now to prepare for it, but do that daily review. But here's the cool one. This is the weekly review. Now really, really listen to me here. This is amazing what this can do for you, okay? I book out recurring time on Fridays to do my weekly review, and I do that so I can go into my weekend clear.
Can you imagine entering your weekend not having to worry about where Project X stands with your staff, or worrying if Susan is going to get the inventory report done for you by Monday, right? So what does that involve, this weekly review? It means reviewing all of your projects for next actions. So you go through. Is every one of those 50 to 100 or more projects, do they have a next action associated with them to move the ball down the field? If not, what is it? Define it. Either put it on your calendar or put it on a task list. Wipe your hands and say, I'm done. I now know with that project where I stand. I don't have to think about it or worry about it. I have a next action associated. Review all of your lists to schedule next actions. So when you look through that list of next actions that you've collected, some of them may need to move onto your calendar to move the ball down the field. So review all those lists and say, oh, you know what, here's my Home Depot list. I think I need to pick up fertilizer and I can pick up these other things. I'm going to go to Home Depot on Saturday morning, right? So review all those lists. Here's the other one I love. Review your calendar backward and forward 2 weeks. It's amazing what you'll uncover, especially when you go forward, because you'll say, oh, that's right, I'm traveling to Poughkeepsie on Tuesday. What do I need to do? I need to pack. I forgot to pack. And yes, I am that much of a calendar junkie that I put pack for trip on my calendar. Because if I don't, what's going to happen? I'm going to go take my kid to karate that night. I'm going to, make dinner maybe. I'm going to watch that DVD box set, and then I'm going to remember, oh, crap, I still have to pack. And then I cause myself a self-inflicted wound and chaos. So that little bit of planning of just typing something on your calendar and living by your calendar saves you a tremendous amount of problems. And then empty all your buckets, your inbox, your phone. Make everything gets clear for a moment in time, and you have that nirvana state where you're completely in, free-floating in productivity space, and you're at one with the world and the universe, and you've beaten the tar out of chaos for a brief moment. That's what your Friday clear should be. So I saved the elephant in the room for last year. I want to say that your email inbox is not a system, okay? What's lurking in your email inbox, those hundreds or thousands of emails that are there, and what could potentially be in there that can bite you? Whether you think about that consciously or not, your brain is thinking about it, because every time you open that email and you see rows and rows and rows and scrolling of emails, some part of you knows there's something in there you haven't dealt with. It's not a system. It's shark bait. It will bite you. It will come back to get you and get you bad. Why is it that we don't think that processing email is part of our job? Okay? We look at it on the phone, we do it on the fly, and we deal with things reactively, but why don't we actually ever process our email inboxes to zero? Many of us don't. Okay? I believe it's either fear or lack of a trustworthy system. Fear because you may need that email someday. Okay, I got to say that. And I do agree there's a lot of CYA in our world where, for those of you that cover your butt, that's what that means. But we need to keep stuff. But there's also the fact that we don't have a trustworthy system where we know we need to park that. I guarantee you many of those emails are action-related. Why are they in your email inbox? Okay, think about that, the amount of mental psychic energy that's devoted to all those open loops sitting in your inbox. This is what it's like. This is what happens, okay? You realize you need to do something, and you realize that something is in an email in your inbox. You open up the search and find tool in your MS Outlook or whatever it is, and you type in inventory report, right? And you search, no, that, and then you got last year's that came up. No, not last year's. And then you have all these other things that the word inventory comes up on. No, not that. And you're searching through to find it. And while you're doing that, you stumble upon another email that you didn't deal with 2 weeks ago, and you're like, oh, crap, I need to do that too, right? I see this happen all the time. That hunt and peck method of searching your email inbox, it may work for you. I know people that fight me vehemently saying, nope, I'm able to be productive. I can find it in my email inbox. Sure, I have 10,000 emails sitting in my inbox. I can find it, and I get things done. But what they are neglecting to realize is the amount of time that they spend trying to find that thing through the search and find method is at least 3 times greater than if they would have just dealt with the email properly to begin with. So I have a poll question. How many emails are in your inbox right now? And I think we're going to have that pop up. Joshua's going to pop that up on the screen. So you got a few seconds. I mean, and be honest with me here. And some of you may say 0, but that may not be a good thing depending on what you do with those emails either. But just quickly, if you can, let's do a little poll and tell me how many emails are in your inbox. So the herding cats concept, that is what keeping all of these emails in your inbox is like. And Joshua, I can't actually see the poll results there, but if you maybe chime in or let me know what we've got for some totals there.
Yeah. For the 0 to 10, we have 4%, 11 to 25, 9%, 26 to 50, 16%, and by a large margin, 50 plus is 71%.
Okay. So when I started this meeting, I had 2 emails in my inbox because I processed my inbox to 0, and I think that's something that we need to do. For tips on how to do that, you'll get the Getting Things Done book, and we'll talk about that at the end here in a couple slides. But there you go. So let's do the second question real quick. This ties into it. How many of you use subfolders for your email in your Outlook? And if so, do you categorize them by person? In other words, Jane Doe, Fred Smith, you know. If you use subfolders, do you categorize them by person? And I don't have anything necessarily against subfolders in Microsoft Outlook and these other email programs. The problem is we're segregating them by the wrong category. When you segregate it by person, you're taking a pile of chaotic mess and just segregating it into smaller piles of chaotic mess. I'm going to make a suggestion, okay, for how you should be dividing your subfolders. If you use subfolders, do it by project. And the good thing about that is once that project is done, you can take all the contents of that folder, copy it, and save it on your hard drive for future reference. When you do it by person, if you have emails you get from me, I'm emailing you about 50 different projects on a daily basis. Why would you segregate it by me? So let's get a result of the poll, Joshua. What do we have on the result?
I'm sorry. 35% said yes, 65% said no.
There we go. Okay, so we've actually got some people that don't do it that way. Excellent. And listen, this is a very intuitive way. People say, okay, I have that email. It's from a person, therefore I'm going to file it by person. Rather than do that, experiment. Try doing it. 7th floor build-out project. Okay, and then any emails associated with that project, move it there. Of course, after you've run it through the system, you know, and derived any action items from it. So, real quick at the end of all this, I'm going to give you some tips. Okay, tips for meetings. This is the easiest way for me to assess the health and productivity of a department or group is by attending some of their meetings. And you know, I've been to a lot of chapter meetings, some that use Robert's rules effectively, some that don't. I've been to a lot of corporate meetings, and I observe. I sit back, I listen, I watch. And from that and from some other literature out there, mainly a book called Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni, highly recommend it. Death by Meeting, Patrick Lencioni. Here's some ways to run your meetings. Designate someone to capture and distribute the next actions that your meetings generate. For goodness sake, if you're going to waste, you know, everyone's time by getting together in a meeting, okay, I shouldn't say waste, but because that's what most of them end up being. But if you're going to invest everyone's time in a meeting, for goodness sake, make it effective. Okay? Always ask yourself and others, what is the next action as you go through? Don't just come up with ideas and throw them out on the table and so forth. It's like, okay, yes, but what is the next action associated with that? And then before you, oh, wait, everybody, don't get up. Sue, could you read off the next actions? Okay? Okay, does everybody have that? Bill, do you have that? Sheets, okay? Everybody has that? Okay, let's adjourn. Determine what needs to be communicated to whom and when. If you decide something that has a cascade effect in your organization about these next actions, who's going to communicate them and when? And here's my favorite. Encourage productive yet uncomfortable conflict in your meetings. If you notice somebody looking at the other person cross-eyed when a project gets talked about or something, deal with it right then and there. Bill, I noticed you kind of rolled your eyes a little. What's going on? Let's talk about it. Because if you don't, Bill is going to subvert your project, and that next action is going to fall through the cracks like the Grand Canyon and hit the floor. Get it out on the table now and secure agreement with the group, and you'll eventually create, in the best of all possible worlds, a high-performing group that's responsible to each other. But if you allow it to fester on the outside, those next actions are going to get pushed further and further back and subverted. So I highly recommend you read this book. Now, if you can't read, and you're like me, you spend a lot of time on the road, do an audiobook. I have a subscription to Audible, but you can pick up the Getting Things Done audiobook at any FedEx Kinko's for like 19 bucks, 20 bucks. And if you really are interested in this concept, David Allen, the David Allen Company, does group and personal training on GTD. And if you go on their website, you'll see he's all over the world. I mean, he's training people in St. Petersburg, Milan, Poughkeepsie, and all points in between. And he's a very gentle, well-spoken person who's not at all an anal retentive time management snark. He's not like that at all. His desire is to free us from the chaos and constipation in the brain that results from all of this stuff. Now, if you get really good at this, consider the NetCentrics add-in. I use that. Everything I talk to you about, it kind of does seamlessly with Outlook, and I don't have to take 2 or 3 extra steps to get it done. So look into that after you've read the book. It might be an opportunity for you. Or you can use other apps to do. There's a lot of Getting Things Done apps out there you can use. He also has some good books on a philosophical approach to time and productivity, where you're dealing with, well, what is important to you? This is more the nuts and bolts, more focused on the actual practical here. So I want to leave you with a few points, and it's critical that you remember some things, and I want you to remember these. And if you want to write them down or get them in the handouts that are going to follow, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. That's the quote by David Allen. Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. Secondly, don't try to remember anything. Listen to your thoughts and capture it in the system. It takes training and habit for you to listen to yourself. Why did I think that? And capture it. Okay. Number 3, use a waiting for list. You will thank me. You will thank me when your staff was about ready to drop the ball on something that you asked them for, or your vendor or so forth, and you helped them catch the ball and told them you're going to be checking with them in the future on these things. Okay? Always ask yourself and others, what is the next action? If you really want to move a project down the field, what is the next action? Don't just leave it amorphous. And then finally, communicate with future you via your calendar. Think about it like the umbrella. Don't try to remember. Don't try to remember anything. Okay, so there's a little bit about our company. As it was mentioned, I'm with DFS Green. Basically, we do the things typically that where your janitorial stops, that's where we pick up. That's where we take off. So with that, I'd like to open it to any questions, Joshua, if anybody has anything. Again, I can't see anything on the panel, but if you want to read me some of the questions, if there are any, I'd be happy to take them.
Certainly. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, just please type them into the chat box, and I'd be happy to read them off to Wayne. We have one, I think we kind of covered it, but I just want to make sure we get it answered. That where can they get a copy of the system, which I think they're probably going to be referring to that book, but also I will be sending out a PDF of the PowerPoint, so you'll have this as reference as well. And the name of the book again, Wayne?
It's called Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Excellent.
It's something our federal government should issue to every employee.
Okay. We're getting towards the end of time. I'll give it just another moment to see if we get any questions put through.
Well, hopefully that meant I was comprehensive.
Okay, someone has one. Are action item lists? Are your action item lists on paper, or do you use an app to capture them?
I personally capture them in Outlook. So I have, if you go to the GTD website, there's a manual for setting up Outlook to use getting things done. It used to be free. They might be charging $5 or $10 for it now, but it's a way to configure your Outlook so it can use this system. But I do keep it in segregated, color-coded tasks in Outlook. And I really do this stuff, guys. I really do use these lists.
And someone's asking, are you aware of some of NetCentric's versions or Lotus Notes?
Yes, David Allen actually uses Lotus Notes, and some of his staff do also, instead of the NetCentric's tool. I use the NetCentric's tool. I have been for about 8 years, and I couldn't function without it.
And then
I think it's $79.
Okay, sorry. And then someone's asking, is this going to be available as a recording? Yes, the Corporate Facility Council posts all the first Wednesday webinars on their website. When I send out the PDFs, I will send you a link to that portion of their website. Usually give them about 24 to 48 hours to get it posted. Okay, it says, do you use the task feature of your Outlook or keep the follow-up to-do items in the calendar?
It depends. If it's something that needs to be done by a specific time, I will put it on my calendar. I put it in my all-day section, and I say, waiting for Fred to send me such and such. So if I need to know by next Tuesday, I put it on my Tuesday. When I get to Tuesday and I show up for work, I open it up and say, oh, I need to follow up with Fred. I send him an email or call him, and I do it that way. But I also have a list of those which are not time sensitive, where I just asked for something. Sometimes, like, it's something that, I'm just waiting for him to get back to me about this. To a buddy of mine about setting up a, let's go out and have coffee or something, and I don't put a specific time to it. And as my weekly review comes up, I'll say, oh, there's Bill. I told him we get together for coffee. I'll leave that there until next week, and I'll review it again then.
It says, where do you capture at waiting list? In the task section on Outlook or in a folder?
In a task section in Outlook. So if you go to the GTD website and get that setting up Microsoft Outlook for getting things done, it helps you to reconfigure your task and to-do list to handle these categories and how to set them up. One of the tips they give, as a matter of fact, is to put a lowercase lowercase z, in front of all your personal items, so it segregates those to the bottom of the lists. But yes, my waiting for list is a separate segregated category of task.
Okay, and we have one last question. I think we kind of touched on it, but we'll just get to it real quick. It says, do you use Evernote, OneNote, or a similar app, or just use Outlook exclusively?
I use Outlook exclusively, and part of that is habitual, though I believe on my someday maybe lists, I may have or have had research, and I call it R&D, Evernote, because I've seen some people use it, but I'm in my mid-40s, and I got my habits, and my habits are using notepads. Even David Allen, who wrote this book, he uses notepads. He keeps a little notepad in his wallet, a tiny one, and writes things on it and comes home and throws it in his own inbox. Paper is just fast for me, and I'll quickly mention, someone taught me, Catherine Lopez, a friend of mine, you might know her, it's from IFMA, she's on the foundation. She would always keep a big marker and pad in her car when she drove, and as she's driving, if something comes into her mind she doesn't want to forget, she can reach over and blindly kind of scribble something without taking her eyes off the road, and write it on that pad. I can't do that with Evernote, and that's been my challenge in utilizing that tool over pads. But being lead AP and sustainability, I think I probably do need to consider some other means other than paper at some point.
Great, thank you. Wayne, I want to thank you for the presentation. You gave us a lot to think about and action items, etc. And everyone, at the end of the webinar, an email survey will be sent out to you. I do encourage you to answer the survey. The CFC is always seeking your input and feedback on these first Wednesday webinars. Again, Wayne, I'd like to thank you. It was excellent. Everyone, you have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.